Hello and welcome to Lower League Lingo episode 21, but my goodness, it's very different to the previous 20 that we've done. Why? We'll come back in 12 seconds time and we'll tell you all why. Yes, hello. We have got no results coming through today. We're not going to be sitting there looking at leagues and discussing all of those sorts of things because something way bigger has happened than that. No, we are going to be looking at the shake-up that has been proposed as released by Tom Gary, but the tiers 3 to 6, bit of a pyramid change. So we thought to ourselves, yeah, John could explain it. Yeah. Gareth could explain it. Yeah. I could explain it. Yeah. Tom Gary, you could go and read his stuff. But actually, we've got somebody else who has put together a lovely little video and they are going to run us through. So for the next few minutes, we're going to go not quite live to a friend of the show, Stu Barker from Since 71. He is going to explain to us all what it is that these pyramid changes will do. So here we go. 5 minutes of Stu starting now.
Thank you, guys. Yes, so there has been some big news within the women's football pyramid over the last week. Tom Gary has broken the news that there will be a league restructure covering tiers 3, 4, 5 and 6 coming into place from the 26-27 season. The FA are currently in dialogue with the stakeholders to establish how that can best be implemented. But the big takeaway and the biggest positive through all of this is that there will be an increase of league sizes. Leagues will be moving from 12 clubs to 14 clubs, with the transition between those divisions aided by the introduction of a playoff system. We know full well about how playoffs tend to look, and it adds a bit of jeopardy to a season. It adds some fantastic stories to a football season, and I think it's great news. I hope that I really hope that we're going to see these matches televised, or at least available to watch online. I'm based in the south coast of England, so I don't get to see a great deal of the northern National League teams. So if that is then made available and I can sit down and spend a number of weeks, a number of hours over a weekend watching various playoff games, then that'd be wonderful. I think the more games that are streamed on the National League, the better, and the more eyes that we get on this league are only going to be a good thing and assist in the growth. However, it's not all good news, because there is the news that professional game academies and B teams may well be introduced to tiers 4 and between tiers 4, 5 and 6 over that season. These were professional game academies are going to be the likes of Southampton under 21s, Manchester United under 21s. We've seen these teams competing in the National League Plate competition this year with mixed success. I note that Man United managed to get through to the semi-finals to be knocked out by Bournemouth. So can they compete at this level? Yes, they can compete at the level. Will it aid in the development of those players? Yes, certainly, because we know that the youth leagues aren't of the required standard and they're not fit for purpose in that sense. But I would rather see these players utilising the loan system or dual registration, so that existing clubs can benefit from their talents. I know that there are a lot of clubs run by volunteers at this level, and if they can have a player on loan from the likes of Man United, Brighton, Manchester City, Liverpool, then that is only going to be a good thing. That will raise standards across the division, get more eyes and interest within the division. So yeah, you utilise that one. We don't need them in division. There are a lot of teams that already exist in the National League that need to be lifted up, not pushed down. So I really do hope that this move doesn't come to fruition, but the cynic in me thinks that it might do, because people at the top will think it'll be great to get a big name team within the lower league divisions, where the reality that's not what people want. They want their local teams these sort of mid-table teams within, especially Division 1, they'd want them lifted and elevated and supported with the resources that they need. We put out a poll on Since 71, and it stated that 79% of respondents didn't support the introduction of PGAs and reserve teams, while 11 were undecided. So it just goes to show the level of dissatisfaction with that one. To my knowledge, there hasn't been any news shared about how this will affect the Super League and the Championship. I'm not expecting it to change at all. I think that will remain the same, of the two being promoted from the National League Premier North and South, and the two being relegated from the Championship, which isn't the worst thing, I guess, if it's a movement of two teams, but I'd certainly love to see the playoff brought into the Championship as well, and two relegation places brought into the Super League. While I'd hoped that they'd have increased the size of the Super League and Championship, I think it's most likely that will come into play after this new tiers 3 to 6 restructure has been embedded a little bit. So yeah, exciting times. From what I'm led to believe, the consultation is ongoing now and will be due to be completed end of March, early April. So hopefully the news will be shared by the end of April, or at least by the end of the season. I'm aware that the Football Association do want to get this news out and get the outcome confirmed before the end of the season, to try and give teams a good 12 months to get everything in place so that they can thrive. Yeah, exciting times, and I'm sorry I can't join you guys live, and hopefully I can join you guys soon. And I'd love it if you guys can comment below with your views. Thank you.
There we go. Thank you very much, Stu. And yes, indeed, the rain was smashing. We very much enjoyed that. It was quite nice, actually. It's soothing. Reminds me of being in a tent when it's wet, and you're like, oh, it's lovely because I'm not wet. So there we go. Well, now's a good time to introduce the people that are here live. Thank you again, Stu, for breaking that down for us. But John and Gareth, how are we? John, are you okay?
Yeah, very well. Thank you, Barry. Not too bad. You okay?
Yes, I'm very well. Thank you. And Gareth, how are you?
Fabulous. Thank you very much.
Excellent. I think we both need to wish John as well today a very happy birthday, because it is John Foster MUFC's birthday. He is 25 years old today, and he's still chosen to come on, even though he's off out this evening for jollities and frivolity. So very much appreciate having you here. But happy birthday, John. Hope you are having a cracking day. Right, that's all the formalities out of the way.
Before we jump in, John, it must be quite a significant guest list for your curry night out, because the amount of teams that you are involved with and champion on this show is extraordinary. So even if you invited just 2 people per club to your meal, that is half a restaurant, I think. So yeah, enjoy. And we know how much you love chicken. We know how much that you are partial to that. So I assume it's going to be a chicken something that you order today.
Absolutely. Probably a chicken madras, where a couple of guests that people on this show will know, Andrew Wall and Kieran Jones. They've studied for me in the past, so they will be there as well. And even though I support and cheer on a number of local teams, it doesn't necessarily mean that they cheer on each other. So I think the chemistry, if I invited everybody down, could be a little bit awkward. So there are a couple of invites, of course, but yes, the ones that you guys know, Andrew Wall and Kieran Jones.
Imagine, like the EastEnders, wouldn't it? A great big brawl of some sort during Christmas. Get out, Mark Harryhouse. Oh, terrible. Right, well, we've heard the proposals, and they're fairly big, fairly large. Let's break them down into bite-sized chunks, shall we, first of all? So the first proposal is, of course, let's make it so there are more teams in the division. So before we worry and like the blue touch paper on Gareth about how you make up those teams, let's concentrate first of all on the fact that they want tier 3 and tier 4 to have 14 teams per league rather than 12. Obviously in tier 3 that's going to be 4 extra spaces. In tier 4 there are another 4. league, so therefore another 8. If you're very good at your maths, that's 12 extra spaces. So in terms of tier 3 and 4, do we think that's a good thing, trying to build up the number of teams that are in there and moving that up to 14 teams? So ignore the teams, don't get too upset yet, Gareth, leave that bit for now. But what do we think about increasing the number? Gaz, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first half of this show for me is going to be really positive, because I think this is fantastic. I think we've been crying out for a while to have more teams. I think we've suffered from a bottleneck, not just between the regional leagues and the national league. I think if you look across some divisions, we're seeing title races where there probably are 2 teams that can go up and compete. So to see this increase number of teams across all of those divisions, across all 6 divisions, is welcome. I think as well, based on some of the plans, there will be, I believe, an increased number of spots available at the regional league level as well. I think the plan is nationally to roll out format B across the regional leagues, which is 1 Premier Division and then 3 divisions at tier 6. So where, for example, in the North at the moment, you've got the Northwest Premier Division, then Northwest Division 1 South and Division 1 North, there would be a 3rd division there. I don't know exactly how that's going to look. But for example, it might be a Division 1 North, Division 1 Central, Division 1 South, something like that. And they will be, I believe, 10 teams. So instead of there being the 24 at the moment, there will also then be 30 teams there. So there is that same bottleneck between the county leagues and the regional leagues. So they've seen this bottleneck of quality up and down the pyramid. So in order to get that movement through and that quality at the levels that they're able to play at, that's fantastic, and I think that it's a welcomed thing. Then I think, though, it needs to be done on merit. And I don't think necessarily there should be an application process. And I don't think that it should be based on off-field factors necessarily. So I think the criteria to go up needs to be relatively fixed and based on league positions. Hopefully that it will be done and decided by on-the-field matters rather than off-the-field matters.
Absolutely, and Stu's saying he's got mixed feelings about the entitlement of some teams just because they've got better resources than teams above them. The league never lies. If they've not won their league, then they can't go up. That won't necessarily be true when we move to the next part of moving up and down, but that will come a little bit later on in the show. John, for you, obviously, Gareth mentioned tier 6 going from 16 divisions to 24, potentially 10 in each. That makes 52 vacancies. Again, we'll talk about how we're making up those vacancies in a moment. But in terms of just making the leagues bigger in the lower league pyramid, what do you reckon? Is that a good thing? Is it the right thing?
Absolutely. It's been a long time coming. I know there was that graphic going around a couple of days before the Tom Gary article, where there's like 3 boxes, and I actually think 2 of those boxes is very welcoming. I think it's the end box that has probably created a bit of that controversy, and I know Gareth did mention about like the criteria, and I thoroughly agree with that. And you can even include the so-called B teams in that criteria. How do we know what league what tier they're going to go into? How's that going to be judged? Obviously, it could be tier 4, could be tier 5 or tier 6. As for increasing the leagues in tier 3 and tier 4, absolutely is what we've all been crying out for, and I think it's very interesting how all the headlines have leaned towards that, because I think the FA know that's a positive thing. It's only when you start reading down to the bottom couple of paragraphs where it starts to get a bit more of a debate, I guess. So yeah, look, 14 teams is right. I'm surprised, like Stuart said, it's not gone into the Super League and Championship, but I'm sure something will happen there in due course as well. But yeah, absolutely. And the playoff system as well. I don't know if you're going to come on to that bit now shortly, Barry, but it certainly just makes the whole season worthwhile, where some seasons are probably over by October time, especially if you're out to the Cups. At least it's elongates the season in regards to meaningful games and not just playing for the sake of it.
No, absolutely. And there's two ways in which we can go through to this. We can either go to how the teams are built and filled up, or the playoffs. But I think the playoffs one is a nice one to go to. You mentioned there about not expanding the WSL yet, not expecting expanding the championship. The WPLL didn't comment. They weren't interested in mentioning anything about this, which I found quite interesting. So you've got the WSL that's obviously 12 teams. You've got the championship that's 11 at the moment. Not really much talk as to how they're going to fill that up again, as to whether or not that's going to be 11 next year or whether that's going to be 12 again. So they do need to think about how that's going to happen, how they're going to fill that spot back up. Because it can't just stay at 11, surely. So that's the first conversation. But this idea that obviously tier 3, there will still only be the one going up from each league. Now, obviously, that is still a win. The fact that they don't have to play off anymore in order to get up there. So that is two up, two down, which is way better than it was even just a year ago. So that's a good thing. But what's really interesting is how the rest of the leagues are going to work. So for tier 3, there's going to be a lot of teams going down. So I believe it's 2 teams per league for that. So there's going to be a lot more going down. And what's even more interesting about that is, as you said, you've got the winners of the league going through of the 4. And then, of course, they've got so it's three teams going down all in all, because you've got the 4 spaces that will be filled as per normal through the winners of the 4 regionally put leagues: Southeast, Southwest, North, and Midlands. As all people watching this show will know, because we've done that to death this year, running through those. But then the remaining 4 will enter a playoff. So those people that finish second will all play off against each other. Presume it'll be drawn out of a hat or something like that as to how they're going to do it, or maybe they'll get the North to play the Midlands and the 2 Souths to play, and then we'll have a North v South battle for supremacy, which I've got to be honest would be quite good for this show, because I would love to take you 2 on. Whether or not the South is better than the North when it comes to football would be very interesting indeed. So, what do you make of the playoff situation? Because I think it's a good thing to do. I think it adds a little bit more, I don't want to say jeopardy, but it certainly adds a lot more interest. You look at our league at the moment in tier 5. If Royston look like they're going to win it, and if Royston don't, it's going to be Luton. What you're fighting for, if you're sat there in those, we've seen so many league tables that are not quite going to have a chance to challenge the top spot, but they could challenge for second or third. But what does it matter? You don't get too much extra money. Nothing really happens. Do we not think that this is a good thing? You can start off with this one, John, to have that ability for the playoffs to be something else to aim for, to aspire for.
Well, it's an extra additional game or 2 at the end of the season as well. So obviously that can potentially bring you some more money for attendance. And you'd like to think that the attendances for the playoffs would be more than maybe like an average game in December. So that could obviously bring a bit more of an impact, and you can promote that. So that's obviously a good thing. And I also think the additional promotion there as well, or the chance of promotion, it might encourage more investment for clubs. So of course, anyone could potentially win a playoff. So if you're a team that's potentially like 7th or 8th in that league, pushing for maybe like a top 5 kind of place, would they invest that extra bit of money into it? And also, if you're, say, for example, a tier 3 or tier 4 who's pushing, if you've seen somebody else go full time or invest a lot of money, you may be declined in the past to think, okay, let's wait till next season because we don't stand much of a chance of going up. For example, Newcastle, who pumped in a load of money last year, if you were Forest or Wolves, you might be less inclined to compete with them. Same as this year with Forest going full time, that might have hindered Burnley, Stoke, and Wolves investing more money because you're thinking, well, I might spend all this money and we still might not get promoted. Whereas now with that additional place, you can kind of really, if it was me, I'd be thinking to myself, yeah, we've not got more of a chance here. Let's invest a bit more. So yeah, I think there's a lot of positives, as well as just the excitement for fans.
No, absolutely. I mean, Gareth, I presume you would think the same thing. It's bound to create a little bit more excitement in the league, and like we say, a little something for those teams that are not likely to win the league to have that opportunity at least to get a bit more money spinning, and I can already see the marketing for trying to get the playoffs going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you look at the Division 1 North, for example, at the moment, there are 4 teams within 4 points of each other. Some games in hand and stuff there, but as things shake out, teams are going to be neck and neck, and there's a fantastic title race, and that's fantastic for the team that ends up coming out on top. But having that extra spot available would be fantastic. I think as well, it's worth potentially looking into the idea that in a similar way to the Bundesliga do. I don't know if it's in the women's Bundesliga, but definitely in the men's, where the team that finishes third bottom is also in that playoff. So it potentially, you could have that team that finishes third bottom in the north and the south somehow go in. I think that would be tricky to work out, considering that there are 4 divisions beneath the north and south. But if we're looking at introducing playoffs further down the pyramid as well, then potentially, you're looking at Norton and Stockton, for example, at a 10th in the Division 1 North. Could they go into a playoff with the North and the Northeast and Northwest potentially? Again, it sounds kind of numerically tricky, but I think that adds an extra level of excitement as well, because then you make sure that the team that wins is going to be able to compete at the level, or potentially compete at the level, and I think that makes more of an occasion of it. I don't know if that will come in. It's just something that I quite like in football, and if the numbers are a bit awkward, then that's a way of making them happen. But yeah, I think it's fantastic. I think, like Stu mentioned in the video, I would like to see them get attention somehow. I think we've had games before streamed on the BBC Red Button, I think, from the National League, so that could potentially be an option. Maybe not like the semi-finals and things, but a playoff final, I think, would get some attention, or at least streamed on YouTube. County FAs managed to do YouTube streaming for County Cup games. Unfortunately, we were on the wrong end of one of those at the weekend, but or the weekend before last, we didn't have a game this weekend. But the facilities are there to stream games, and I think if County FAs can do it, I know Leeds United, for example, stream a lot of their games on YouTube. Then that would be fantastic if that then is pushed and publicised. Yeah, I think they're overall positives. They add a lot for teams. The marketing, like we say, the occasion, the opportunity to push yourself and challenge yourself. The fact that people's seasons, some of them are over in January. I think if you look at the table now, you can probably say, oh, these teams their seasons are probably done. Whereas if there was that extra thing to play for, whether that's at the top or bottom of the league, there's something else there to either not get sucked into or push on and try and sneak into towards the end. And I think that's fantastic. And I think, I look forward to these elements of the proposal. There's other wording where potentially I'm a bit more opposed, but we'll get onto that eventually.
Well, indeed, we've got about 10 minutes as a maximum left before John Foster's taxi will arrive. It's not really a taxi, it's Andrew Wall, but it's close enough to take him off for his beloved meal. So we do need to press on with this. But I think absolutely. By show of hands, just a thumbs up or a thumbs down, though. It's not really lower league. But do you think that the WSL and the Championship should now be 2 up, 2 down as well? So should there potentially be a playoff for the Championship to go to WSL? Yeah. Okay, cool. I agree. So, grand. Right, we're going to have to bite the bullet now, because I'm sure Gareth's going to go off at some point. So I'll let John have his say, just in case Gareth takes up the next 15 minutes and John has to slide away. But how they're filling up these vacancies is very, very interesting. We've seen so many clubs that have been part of the league and then had to drop out, withdraw because they couldn't be run, they didn't have the funding, or they couldn't get the players. Lots of different reasons why they might need to do so. But we know that out of the 12 spots in Tier 3 and 4 that are being created, 6 of them are being held for WSL or Championship B teams. What's interesting for them, they can't go any higher than Tier 3 or 2 tiers below their first team. So if Manchester United got relegated to Tier 3, they wouldn't be allowed to have their reserves above Tier 5, which in itself is quite interesting. Equally, in Tier 5 and 6, those ones that are being expanded, those 52 vacancies, again, will be through B teams or through WNL reserves. Now, Stevenage, we've got a first team. We've also got a reserve / development side. The development side play in the league below us. We play in the Premier. They play in Division 1 North. Obviously, if the development side won the league, they wouldn't be able to go up into our league because that's a big conflict of interest. You could just say, well, that's 6 points for us. Lovely. Thank you very much. So that wouldn't really be very fair. But it's happening already at some lower league teams. So, John, what do you think of this idea of getting the B teams in? There's pros and cons, I think, for both of it. Where do you fall on it?
I'm not a massive fan of it at all. I think it helps the PGA teams. I think it helps the big clubs. I think I look at Tier 5 with the leagues not expanding. I do agree with that. I think with the amount of games that they already have to kind of struggle to fit in, I'm not looking at expanding those leagues. However, if you're going to then put some PGA teams in Tier 5, then it's taking out a position for another team potentially, which I'm not a huge fan of. I agree with yourself there, Babby, in regards to what Stevenage have got. I know other teams in our areas have got the same, so I wouldn't expect those teams to be any higher than Tier 3. I don't think they've probably got the capabilities of it at the moment anyway. I think this season and last season has been a bit of a test in kind of gauging what level some of these B teams are. We saw some of these teams come into the county cups last season. We've seen them in the FA Women's National League play this season. I think that's all being calculated. I think there's a reason for that. And I think it's all kind of led to this. I think Stuart made a great point in regarding loan players. I think that's kind of got to go out the window now. It's I can't see any way how it's going to help the current teams who are in the National League pyramid. And I think it is very aimed towards the PGA players, which obviously I know plenty of parents, and I'm sure maybe we do with our Man United contacts or elsewhere, who's got daughters who play for the PGAs, and obviously they would have probably a different view of us because it will develop. We will develop their daughters, of course. However, I think as a pyramid as a whole, I don't think it's going to add much apart from maybe a few more eyes on it, because obviously Man United fans now will automatically be interested in the National League. But then will it become a monopoly again, like the top 4 in the WSL already are?
It seems fair in what you're saying. Gareth, I know that you have strong views on this, so I'm going to let you loose now. But I suppose the interesting part for me there is that they say they can't go any higher than Tier 3. So let's say Chelsea put out a B side and they put themselves in and they make it to Tier 3 and then they win the league. So what does that mean? Does that mean that only one team goes down and one team goes up via the playoffs? Does it mean that they just automatically promote the next one below and they've just got to stay there? The competitive edge of it seems wrong, because then does that mean, well, the one that finished 11th doesn't need to go down now? They're going to get a reprieve. How could such a thing work? Or do you think that's something that they're going to try and cross in a few years if those B teams have worked their way up to Tier 3?
So I think in Spain they have B teams within their men's pyramid. And I believe the way it works is if one of those B teams were to win the league, then the second place team would be, then essentially the promotion just shifts down. So second place team would be promoted automatically, and then it would be like third place would go into the playoffs, which I don't particularly like. I don't like this at all, but I think it serves the purpose that I suspect both the FA and the WSL clubs want it to, which is it's going to develop their players.
This has really got me here. So technically, you could have 6 WSL teams with 6 B teams that finish first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth in the Tier 3, with the promotion then just go to the 7th team. That would be mad.
In theory, yeah. Which, like you say, would be absolutely crazy. It would be mad. And I think it's going to serve the purpose that I think the WSL wanted to. I think it'll serve the purpose that the FA wanted to, which is to develop younger players. I would argue that if the PGA competitions are not adequately developing players, then it's the PGA and the PGA competitions that need the reform, and not necessarily the pyramid as a whole. I think that at the moment they are looking at adding a maximum of 6 spaces for PGA teams, which, to go back to your example later on in a couple of years' time, if we look at this, you could feasibly finish 4th in the league and be promoted as quote unquote champions. Which, when you're looking at transitioning from tier 3 to 2, is tricky. I think Stu made a great point about loan players. I think it's going to reduce that talent pool open to the WNL clubs. I think I just think it's like, I don't know. It worries me, although it's not hugely unexpected. We already see in the men's game that all of the power within the pyramid lies with a handful of clubs, and it worries me now that that is becoming more and more prevalent within the women's game. The thing that concerns me as well is I'm not sure how you can look at the WNL plate this year and go, that was fantastic. Let's roll that out across the leagues, because in the early rounds there were teams giving walkovers, which, Arsenal not. How can we put Arsenal within the pyramid in, a year's time, 18 months time, when they didn't play their first round game of a plate? So I think if the application process is opened, then those clubs that did commit to the plate, whether I like it or not, I don't. It should be those teams that committed all the way through, like your Uniteds, like your Southamptons, that get that option first. My other worry is that if it is just open to 6 teams, we could realistically be looking at Man United, Man City, Liverpool, potentially 3 of those 6 teams. Everton, 3 or 4 of those 6 teams could be from the north, and where you've only got one northern division, that, if they're going into tier 4, well, actually, all of that increased space has been taken up by PGA teams and not by regional league teams. So that, I think, is problematic as well. I think that it should be a maximum of 2 sides per tier 4. But then again, you could end up with Division 1 North and Division 1 South East, London in the southeast, I assume. It could be those sides, those divisions, actually, where they're not really expanded at all to regional leagues teams, because their increase from 12 to 14 has been taken up by United, City, Chelsea, and Arsenal. Well, actually, that's not great for the WNL. That's not great for the regional leagues. That isn't helping with the bottleneck of talent. It's just a way for those top clubs to ensure that their players get developed at the expense of other sides. I think it's a real shame, actually, that United and Southampton got to the semi-final of the plate. I think it would have been, I'm not quite sure who they beat slightly earlier on in the competition, but how great would it have been for them to have the shot at getting into a final? I'm pleased, actually, in the end, that it's Bournemouth and Cheltenham, but I just think it's a shame. I think it achieves what the FA wanted to achieve. I'm not sure, though, that their presence within the competition is actually going to be beneficial to the other sides and necessarily beneficial to the regional leagues. But I guess we'll see how it comes out in the wash. I'm trying to be optimistic, but I don't like it at all, really.
No, that's fine. Just going to butt in now because John Foster's carriage of weights, and like Cinderella, he very well might turn into I don't know what, black pudding. I don't know what you eat in the Midlands. Might turn into one of them. So, talk to us, John. Anything else you want to add that you feel like you need to say before you go?
Yeah, I was going to start Gareth off on one other thing that was mentioned as well. Reserve teams, the reserve leagues, the proposals there, and how the under-21s cup throughout the week. So it seems to me that they're getting additional games there. So they've still got their own cups, but they could also be mingled in with the National League cups. So again, that really favours those by having that more game time. So I'm just curious to see what Gareth thinks of the reserve league, and I will just leave you to that. So I'll watch it a little bit later on repeat. But thanks for having me, guys, and the weights.
Thanks for joining us. Happy birthday again. Enjoy your
Jonathan.
Much love. Cheers, buddy. Thank you. All right,
I think the
John's
reserve.
set you off, Gaza. Go on then, go for it. What's the
Yeah, I don't. I've not looked too much at the reserve league proposals. I think that reserve league sitting outside of the pyramid is fantastic. It sits outside of that pyramid. There's, they have their own competitions. They have their own kind of reserve cups and plates. I think it's fantastic because that is an opportunity for the WNL clubs to have their teams playing competitive football against other teams of a similar level. You don't have to put your teams in there. If your teams want to play within the pyramid, they can. They can't be promoted above tier 6, I believe. At the moment, is the cap on B teams. So clubs have the option of what they want to do. If they want to play at tier 6, well, actually, I think that's a relatively low level for them. So a lot of teams are just putting their teams within the WNL reserve leagues, and yeah, they just sit separately. They play in their own competitions. They play in their own cups. I believe they can play in county cups. But apart from, I'm not too sure what the reforms for that are. I imagine then that they'll be going into the pyramid similarly. So it would just work out that, for example, Stockport Counties development team who currently play in the reserve league would then just be capped at tier 6, and it's that I think that worries me a little bit. Like you mentioned earlier with the promotion relegation, we could end up with these bottlenecks at every level where you've got a WSL B team winning tier 3 and not being promoted, a championship B team winning tier 4, and so on and so forth. Yeah, it kind of worries me. You don't want Chelsea develop. You don't want Chelsea under 21s winning division, the Southern Premier. You don't want Charlton, for example, winning tier 4. You don't want Forest winning tier 5. I think that just is just a bit naff, really. Unlikely, probably to do that, but yeah, it's just a bit uninspiring, a bit underwhelming when the first bulk of the proposals, the expansion of teams, the introduction of playoffs is so good, and then you realize actually that expansion could just be completely negated because it could just go to WSLB teams.
It is a
I think
lot.
there's so much potential, but also it's
It
just a
is.
bit like, yeah.
But do you think that, like, because for every side of a coin there is an opposite side, and there's a lot of conversation within the WSL certainly about how do they make it so that their youth players are able to get competitive football and bridge that gap between youth football and playing at the top level. Now I know this is a lower league show, so obviously we concentrate a lot on the lower league sides, but is there an argument that actually this is the sort of step that might be required in order to make a competitive situation for these youngsters to actually be given an opportunity and a pathway into the top league? Because we've seen players go off on loan to the championship, for example. But if you get a strong lower pyramid, you would be in a situation surely where the WSL would potentially have the opportunity to, number one, expand a bit more, therefore have more games, which would then potentially offer more of a route for the youngsters. So do you think that's maybe what they're thinking of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the purpose of it is to make that transition from youth to senior football easier. Um, I think it will achieve that. I think, it's going to be better football. It's going to be more physical. I think that's the main difference really between junior football and senior football is the physicality. Um, so I think it absolutely will help WSL clubs, and I think that's what it's for. And so I
So
think,
will that not
you
bring
are
up the level of the rest of the teams then that are playing alongside them?
Potentially, yeah. But I don't know. I don't know if it will or if it's actually just going to reduce the player pool. Because let's say, for example, Wythenshawe in a league with Man United and Man City under 21s, and Stevenage in a league with um, Arsenal under 21s.
Mm-hmm.
That previously would have been a talent pool that we could tap into to bring players in, whether that's permanently, whether that's loan deals, dual registrations, all of these options available that Stu mentioned. Whereas now, actually, there's no benefit for the club to do that. There's no benefit for the players themselves to do that. So I think actually it reduces the availability of players around us. I don't know about you guys kind of down there, but we found recruitment tricky up here at the moment. I think there's a real, not a lack of quality, but I think there's a lot of people wanting to play football, and a lot of people being interested in playing football where maybe potentially the quality is not there, and we're seeing a few years for the impact of the Euros wins, the World Cups, the good performances, the Olympics, etc., to filter through. So I think the loan market is great. I think, to use a United-based example, Grace Clinton's been on loan the last 2 seasons, really, at Bristol and at Spurs, at a higher level, obviously. But I think we've seen the impact that going out on loan can have. And I would like to see that utilised more. It just feels a bit underwhelming, like, give with one hand, take away with the other. But we'll see what happens. But yeah, I do worry that it's not just the WSL and the Championship clubs that are going to go in. We could see this all the way down the pyramid when your tier 3 sides come in, when your tier 4 B teams come in. You don't want where you've got tier 3, 4, 5, 6 all being won by B teams with dual registrations and things like that. I know there are rules and things in place, but yeah, it's just a bit underwhelming. And from what could have been a really positive announcement and really positive proposals that I think would have universal backing from everybody, to then include a clause that is essentially pretty universally disliked. That, yeah, it kind of takes the shine off it for me. But we'll see what happens. I imagine that there are consultations and things in place. There are road shows that clubs will be attending and networking and discussing and things like that. I imagine that they're unlikely to make massive sweeping changes to it. So I think if this is going to happen, we're going to have the PGA sides there, whether we like it or not. It's just the devil in the detail that will be kind of hashed out, really, and we'll see what happens.
Because I suppose lastly on that really is the fact that you mentioned there's going to be road shows. So there's some places where, because obviously all of this, the 27-page document was sent out to all of the clubs involved so they could be involved in that. There's going to be online sessions if they can't make it to the road shows. Players are potentially get surveys as well, and the decision's not due to be made until March or April. And obviously this is for 26-27 season. So currently in the 24-25, there's going to be another whole season of 25-26 before this can come into place. I suppose the only other thing that's really left to be said to it is that we've all said that the expansion is a great idea, and it is. But if we don't put in B teams or anything like that, how do we fill in those spaces for the expansion teams? How would you fill those spots if not with these other teams? Do you bring them up from the tier 7? Because I mean, we've got we've got regional ones. We've got the Beds and Hearts League for us, so that would be tier 7. That's where they would drop into from the Eastern region. But how do you do that? And is that too much of a jump?
I think the county FAs have been saying that there is kind of talent at their level, so I think it would have to be done gradually, instead of just going right over one season. We're going to have 2 extra teams in this league. I think you could kind of have you could still keep relegation promotion, but just have that kind of staggered effect down the pyramid. So, for example, you could have your 2 teams go down normally from Division 1 North, but then you could have, for example, both first and second from the Northwest and Northeast get promoted, and then you've shifted that. I think it would require working out. I haven't sort of sat down and figured it out, but you could kind of do something like that, where the top sides from those divisions, are going up. You could almost, if the tier 6, so if the regional league division 1s are increasing significantly, that could be an application process from county leagues where teams have to show kind of quality on the pitch, facilities off the pitch. You could even have in there an element of wanting to show financial stability as well, and kind of a commitment to invest to the appropriate level to go up. I think there are ways to do it. I just think that, like we've said, the purpose of this is primarily to improve the transition from youth to senior football, rather than to try and reduce the bottleneck of teams coming through from the lower rungs of the pyramid, which is where I think I would prioritise it. I don't necessarily think that's what the FA's priority has been.
No, it's very interesting. Like you say, the FA taking charge of that. It's not necessarily the WSL sides that are making this happen, because they are two different entities now, but obviously the FA's only just handed power over to the WPLL, and as a result they are now in charge of those divisions above, and it's a bit of an interesting one. But there we go. That has very much covered the tier 3 to 6 proposals. Like we say, we're not going to know for another couple of months yet, really, so this will rumble on. But what's your opinions? What's your thoughts? If you want to pop that in the comments, feel free. Maybe you might want to come and tweet us over on All for Women's Football. You could do that. You could film an angry TikTok and tag us in that if you really wanted to, or a nice TikTok. You don't have to be angry. Social media could be a nice place if you really want it to be. So yeah, do that. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Very different type of show today, but one that I think we have all enjoyed. Gareth, lovely to have you with us again.
Thank you very much.
We haven't really had too much going on. Wythenshawe, who have they got this weekend?
We've got FC United at home. So, an important game for us.
There we go. We've got a League Cup quarter-final for Stevenage on our way to Wroxham, providing the weather is nice. If not, then we won't, because that's football for you. Brilliant. It's been superb. Thank you so much. Again, a happy birthday to John, who I'm sure later on will have watched the rest of this. Thank you to you guys that have been watching. Like I say, do like and subscribe. Thanks to Stu for his little breakdown right at the very beginning, and we'll look forward to seeing you again. Maybe not quite as early next week, but we will be back next week for Lower League Lingo 22, when I'm sure we'll be looking at the WNL again, tiers 3 and 4. Till then, see you later. Night all.
Yeah.